Hey, what is up, Spice Heads? Welcome back to another video meetup today, sponsored by Trusted Tech Team. We've got a great show for you guys today. We're going to be talking all about what in the heck you can be doing for virtual desktops, whether it's RDS, Windows Virtual Desktop, all of the above. For more on this, we have a great panel of experts for y'all today, including an IT pro from the Spiceworks community, as well as a couple of experts from Trusted Tech Team. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start things off with an introduction. Let's go ahead and welcome our panel. What's up, gentlemen? Thanks for joining us today. We are going to start off our introductions with a member from the Spiceworks community. You guys know him, he's been in chat quite often. Always a pleasure to have him on this side of the camera. Please welcome Mr. Tim Roberts. Tim, how's it going today?
Not too bad. How is everyone today?
Doing well, doing well. Tim, thank you for joining us. For those who have not met you before, do you mind telling us a little about yourself and what you do?
Yes, my title's a weird one. It's IT Network Coordinator at an environmental production services company. They do cleanup. Right now they're doing everything from train derailments, but right now they're especially dealing with COVID cleanup, which is pretty much a big deal. So, and I just run everything in the back end from servers, phones, you name it. If it's got a chip in it and an LED on it, it's probably someone's coming to us to ask a question.
All right, yeah. And then you guys might remember, Tim, if you guys attended in-person Spice World last year, Tim was the one walking around with the giant lightsaber that he then gifted to the on-the-air crew, which is sadly still at the office. I did not remember to grab it before our office shut down, but at least we know where it is and that it's safe. So thank you for joining us today, Tim. We're excited to have you on. Our next panelist from Trusted Tech Team, you guys have seen him on the show many times before. We'd like to welcome back Mr. David Spencer. David, how's it going today?
Hey, it is good. It is a nice sunny 75 in California, so can't complain.
Wonderful. David, for those who have not met you before, do you mind telling us a little about yourself and what you do for Trusted Tech Team?
Yeah, absolutely. So my title officially is the Director of Operations. It is my job to make sure everything goes smoothly on the day-to-day. So whether that's internal, whether that's sales, marketing, I need to make sure that everyone has the ability to do their job. Or if that happens to be with customers and the customer experience, make sure everything goes smoothly for anyone who we work with. Basically make sure everyone has everything they need to get the job done. Falls under me. What that also kind of ends up being is taking down the complicated information in terms of licensing and getting it out to everyone so they can understand it and make it into a consumable format, if you will.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, David. Already got plenty of kudos in chat about your mustache. I think people are really appreciating your quarantine stash, as well as your affinity for the Anaheim Mighty Ducks in the background. Lots of quacking going on in chat. Also, you guys should know David wanted to make sure this was like such a good show for you all today. Didn't want anything interfering with all. He actually cut off the Wi-Fi to the rest of his house to make sure he had a fully dedicated stream. So if you guys have not flexed such a power move in your own house, you can learn a lesson or two from David. So thank you for joining us today, David. I'm excited to have you on. And then last but not least, also from Trusted Tech Team, also named David, everyone please welcome Mr. David Lloyd. David, how's it going?
Hi, everyone. It's going great. It's a sunny day, as David Spencer said, and here in Southern California.
Awesome. And then David Lloyd, do you mind telling us about yourself and what you do for Trusted Tech Team?
Sure. I'm the IT director here. I handle the day-to-day IT needs for both the internal employees and also external clients. I consult for our clients as well as work with our internal infrastructure.
To hear from you as well, David. But before we go any further, a couple of things that I did want to cover off. Again, if you have questions for our panel, make sure to get those questions into our Q&A widget down below. We'll be taking them later on in the show. Also, Trusted Tech Teams provide a lot of great resources for y'all today in that resource list. So please make sure to check that out if you guys haven't already. Also wanted to give a special shout out to chat. Seeing a lot of folks today, a big crowd. a lot of our favorite folks, including Eagle Mitchell, who also complimented me on my shirt. If you guys want to shout out during these segments, you can always compliment me on my shirt or my hair or something else to that effect. Percussive Maintenance, always great to see him. Tim Roberts, who's also on the show. And then Michael 7140 Hertz. Good to see all y'all. Of course, if you do participate in chat, we do ask that you adhere to our community guidelines and make sure that everybody has a positive and professional experience at today's event. And as a special thank you for hanging out with us today, not one, but two of y'all are going to be walking away with $250 Amazon gift cards, because who can't use an Amazon gift card right now? I'm pretty much sure that's the only thing that you can buy from. So we will be announcing the winners of those gift cards at the end of the show. And so make sure to stick around. All right, let's go ahead and get started into it. I think, kind of starting off first with David Spencer. When it comes to, virtualizing desktops, I think, obviously in today's day and age, that's becoming more and more of something that people are looking into now that folks have to be away from the office and really don't have much of a choice on it. But how you kind of get access to that, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Now, there's a lot of people that are confused at the options that are available. Do you mind starting off and giving us a basic overview of Windows Virtual Desktop and RDS, Remote Desktop Services? That's probably one of the biggest questions that we get a lot. Let's start off with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, everything going on, this ended up being a much more pertinent topic than we kind of planned on. But hey, I'm happy to talk about it. So I'll start with Remote Desktop. It's been around for a while. At its core, it's pretty relatively simple concept, accessing a desktop remotely, whether you're accessing a workstation, shared server, outsourced virtual machine. It's still based on like a one user to a machine ratio. The concept is what you would consider old, obviously, in the IT world, starting with terminal services. Server 2000 evolved over time, changing names in 2010 to present day RDS. Obviously, it's one of the more underappreciated components of the IT world, in my opinion. Over time, there have been feature adds, improvements of virtualization, which has worked pretty well so far, but I think it's kind of, stuck to an old way of thinking and stifled innovation, which then, speaking of new things, Windows Virtual Desktop. It, at its core, is the desktop as a service product that's delivered through Azure. So just like everyone, our experience with Windows Virtual Desktop is still relatively new. It is a self-proclaimed 1.0 product. So there's a bunch of new stuff coming out almost on the daily. Honestly, though, it is really, really exciting. We've been looking forward to kind of sharing, all of this with everyone. Honestly, I'll probably end up talking a lot more about Windows Virtual Desktop today than RDS, since RDS has been around for a while. But they've kind of put together, in my opinion, one of the coolest feature sets I've seen in a Microsoft product in a long time. They're, leveraging the Azure platform and the new technology on there. Also, honestly, this would have never been possible 3-4 years ago, before all of the Azure infrastructure was built out, because Microsoft has found a good, efficient way to deliver, an entire virtual desktop package. Honestly, way better than it has any business being. They've made a lot of quality of life changes for both IT staff and end users. They've made the licensing easier, which I know is always a sticking point with Microsoft products. And it makes sense. You don't have to spend a bunch of hours figuring it out, or, to me, my personal favorite, you don't have to have like a crystal ball to see into the future with it in order to determine, the licensing. And it's all done in a way that kind of doesn't break the bank, which is nice. Overall, in my opinion, what Microsoft's done with Windows Virtual Desktop has kind of made up for the lack of innovation that we've seen over the past 10, 15 years when it comes to virtual desktop infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Y'all have heard the joke that it's been the year of VDI for the past 10 years now, and then now it actually literally is the year of VDI for lots of different reasons. But David Lloyd, can you talk to us a little bit about how the technology behind Windows Virtual Desktop looks like? David Spencer said, it's obviously pretty groundbreaking. And so in your opinion, what from a technology perspective makes this so?
Sure. Good. Great question. I'll start by talking about the tech behind Windows Virtual Desktop. With Windows Virtual Desktop, you can create a full desktop virtualization environment with pooled desktops. Those desktops are running Windows 10 Enterprise, and as a special edition of Windows 10 Enterprise, it's the multi-session edition that Microsoft created specifically for Azure and for Windows Virtual Desktop. It's a modified version of Windows 10. They modified the kernel of Windows 10 to allow for multiple sessions, so it essentially makes it into a RDS server, but with the native core of Windows 10. And so this is going to replace the traditional RDS infrastructure moving forward. I think this is what Microsoft's game plan is the next evolutionary step for RDP is to move into this Windows Virtual Desktop service. And so one of the benefits over RDP is it provides greater application compatibility. Because with the traditional RDS setup, you have to have a Windows server and then modify that server to kind of emulate a desktop for each of the users that connect in. And in this case, it is actually Windows 10. You're not emulating the Windows 10 environment. It is Windows 10. And so you have that application compatibility in addition to the scalability with Azure. And so Windows Virtual Desktop, it runs on top of Azure, and Azure has 58 regions worldwide, which is more than AWS. It's more than Google Cloud, both of them combined, actually. As of right now, Google Cloud has 23 regions. AWS has 24 regions. And Azure has the 58, so it's more than both of them combined. There's a tool available to find the best region for the Windows Virtual Desktop infrastructure. It will ping all of the different data centers in the United States or wherever you're located, and it'll find the best round trip time to find the best Windows Virtual Desktop experience for your company. So that tool is going to be in the references and the sidebar for you. If you want to look at that later, I highly recommend it if you are going to be moving into this solution. Why is this possible now? This just came out September 2019. It's been in public preview, but is now generally available. So for about 7 months now, it's been generally available. And actually just last week, they came out with the Azure Resource Manager UI tools to manage it. As before last week, the only way you could provision any of the aspects of Windows Virtual Desktop was completely through PowerShell. But now, moving forward, they're going to be using the ARM, the Azure Resource Manager user interface to provision these host pools, work with the session hosts, assign applications to users, and more. Also, what Microsoft is doing as part of this service is they're handling the platform as a service aspects for you. So what does this mean for you? It means that you no longer have to have a remote desktop app web access role for your infrastructure. Microsoft handles that. They implement it and they maintain it. You no longer need the remote desktop gateway. Also part of the service, it's part of the free platform as a service that Microsoft offers. It's part of Windows Virtual Desktop. And the remote desktop connection broker, also handled by Microsoft as part of the service. The SQL database for the metadata related to Windows Virtual Desktop, that's handled by Microsoft. They maintain the SQL database for that, and you can actually select where you want the metadata stored. So you can, for compliance reasonings, you might want to keep it in the United States. You can choose the data center in the United States to store that metadata. And so this is huge. You no longer need to maintain all these traditional RDS infrastructure roles on premise or in Azure, or however you did before. Microsoft does that all for you. The only thing that you need to maintain are the VMs, what kind of VM sizing you want, and that's pretty much it, and kind of what applications you want to assign to your users, and what kind of path you want to take for your disk management. So how is this different from RDS? One of the main differences is the benefit of the integration with Windows Virtual Desktop and Azure AD. You get the enhanced identity protection that comes along with Azure AD. For example, you can set conditional access policies for your users when they connect in. When they connect in, you can say everyone has to do MFA to connect into the service. So, and that's all part of the Azure P2 plan, which is all integrated with Azure, with Windows Virtual Desktop. Another benefit that kind of changes it up from RDS is you no longer need to expose the port of 3389. They use some secure technology called reverse connect. So you are essentially connecting to a gateway that's hosted by Microsoft over SSL 443, and then all of the internal components communicate from there. You don't have to expose 3389 to the internet. So there's some security benefits. And so there's two more aspects which I think are a great benefit over traditional RDS. One of them is fxlogix profile containers. So this is a new technology that Microsoft made for Windows Virtual Desktop. You can store your profiles in a central location. And so when your users log into the different hosts, their profile will travel with them. It will attach to the host as they log in. And so you won't have multiple profiles created for the host as they log in. They will have one consistent profile. And on the flip side of this is there a technology called MSX App Attach. And this is pretty much the same thing, but for applications. You can make your applications modular. You store them in a central location and you assign them to your users as needed. So you assign the profiles assigned as needed, the applications, and then to the base OS image. It makes it much easier to manage overall, in my opinion. And yeah, these technologies work perfectly for non-persistent environments, such as Windows Virtual Desktop. And just to reiterate, you don't have to worry about the initial setup of these infrastructure roles. Microsoft does that. They handle all the ongoing maintenance. It's part of the platform as a service. And so essentially there's fewer things to maintain, fewer things that you can break under your watch. That's all handled by Microsoft in that area.
Cool. So David Lloyd, we'll stay with you. So I take it then that you guys are using WVD internally at Trusted Tech Team. Is that fair to say?
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Okay, great. Can you kind of tell us from firsthand experience then, what your experience has been? How does this impact you, in your role, and how does it compare in your experience to using RDS?
Sure. So first off, number one, you not only get the common benefits of running your infrastructure in Azure, the scalability and the reliability, all of that comes with Azure, but again, as I mentioned before, they take care of the infrastructure rules for you for RDS. So that's a huge benefit. That's virtual machines that you don't have to pay for. You don't have to run physically. It's all done for you and managed for you. So that's one of the things that managing WVD makes it a little easier. It frees up time for you to do other tasks in your role, and it also simplifies the equipment purchasing. So, for example, you don't need a full Windows client, the desktop client anymore. You just need a thin client. A thin client that just needs a browser that has HTML5 capability. That's all you need to get the basic connection into Windows Virtual Desktop. You can connect into the web portal and then actually access the virtual machines, your virtual pool desktops, through the HTML interface inside the web browser. That won't give you port redirection and all that you may want, but it will give you basic access into the VM, and would be possibly nice for scenarios where your employees are traveling around the world and they are just trying to quickly get something on their desktop. Another way they could access it is by getting a thin client with Windows 10 IoT, the built-in operating system in these thin clients, so that you can access or you can install the Windows Virtual Desktop RDP client. It's a special RDP client that Microsoft designed for Windows Virtual Desktop. You sign in with your Azure account. It'll display display the resources that your users have access to, just like the web page version, and they can access their applications that way with full port redirection as well. Another benefit, new employee onboardings are streamlined. You can assign the applications with MSX app attached just very easily. It'll streamline that aspect to it. Their profiles, you don't have to really worry about that when you're using FX Logic. Their profiles will travel with them to each VM. And so it'll just overall reduce your costs with your on-site devices, because you really only need a thin client. They're not going to be doing the processing. You don't need the memory on site here anymore. It's all done in the virtual environment in Windows Virtual Desktop. So this all contributes to more time for the administrator for other tasks. It frees up time for you to do other things. How does this compare to RDS overall? The Windows Virtual Desktop host can be managed with SCCM in the latest build, so you can manage it pretty easily. There is support upcoming for Intune as well, so you can manage it that way. There's also some community tools available for managing the solution. You can download these tools and give visibility into your VMs, who's connected to each VM, the metrics associated with it, what applications the users are using, and other analytics as well. So just to review, the main enhancements over RDS, it's the MSX app attached, the modularity of those applications. It's the FX Logic's profile containers, making your profiles also modular for these non-persistent environments. And then the third major benefit, as I talked about before, is that Microsoft handles all those infrastructure roles for you. That's a cost savings, that's a time savings. And then finally, some of the requirements that you may want to consider before implementing this. You do need a domain services service available. So in addition to Azure Active Directory, you also need domain services. That's either Azure Active Directory domain services, or that's going to be just plain old Active Directory domain services. So you're going to need to sync your Azure AD identities to one of those services, and then the hosts are controlled through that domain and through group policy and whatnot. So that's one consideration to look at before you look at implementing this. So another consideration is for FX Logics, the MSIX app attach solutions. You both need a file server for those. They both require a general share to store all the different data for the apps and for the profiles.
Cool. Tim, let's hear from you next. So you've had a bit of experience working in virtual desktop environments, both in a previous job as well as today. Can you talk to us briefly about your experience running kind of some of the historic versions and as well as your usage of RDS today? Yeah, we'll start with there, and then I've probably got some follow-up questions.
Yeah, I've had experience with Citrix a lot with various different companies I've worked at, and also VMware. Whenever I was at my previous job that I was at, they switched from using Citrix to using VMware with VMware Player, and we had a lot of configuration issues and misconfiguration that was going on. And even with Citrix, when I started where I am now, they had older servers that they hadn't upgraded, so there was a lot of problems. We had conflict issues between newer client software and the older Citrix servers we had. So we just sort of decided to clean house. We switched away from using that style of client to using more like the remote desktop, because we already had licensing for it anyway. So we decided, why are we going to pay extra for something like Citrix on top of the remote desktop services? So we for us, it was a cost saving, plus also less servers to actually manage. We have Meraki for our networking. So one of the things is that actually integrates with both Azure and AWS. So it actually does help. It makes it that essentially everything is on the same WAN for us versus having to try and figure out other ways to connect. So it sort of locks things down that users still have to VPN in to be able to get access to what they need to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So who do you feel, and then so kind of hearing, what David and David have been talking about Windows Desktop Virtualization, how do you feel like that plays into your experience and kind of what type of organizations do you think should be looking into this or considering this at this time?
Well, at this point, I worked in healthcare. I know there was a big drive there that a lot of the staff members work from home. Just because for them it's easier, they can have a smaller office space if a lot of the administrative roles can be pushed back to work from home people where they're doing a lot of data entry or QAing information that's already in the system. You can have someone literally sitting at home either from their PC or a thin client connecting in, getting access to the same data as if they're in the office, but the business essentially doesn't have to have a larger office space. They can maybe have people come in for meetings once a month or so, and then the rest of the time they maybe have more of a skeleton crew on premise, and the rest of the staff are distributed basically globally at this point.
Mm-hmm. All right. David, Spencer, let's go back to you. I want to make sure that we have enough time for the questions from the audience because we have a lot. Let's get into the meat of the discussion as far as licensing. Obviously, remote desktoping, virtual desktops are great, but only if it's something that's actually affordable. So can you talk us through what the licensing looks like for these?
Yeah. So I'll go over remote desktop first. I know a lot of you are probably already familiar with it, but it falls in the user versus device method of licensing. Basically, you're given the option to either license by the unique number of users, where each user can access from unlimited devices, or vice versa, by the unique number of devices, where you can have unlimited users on those devices. That model is built in a way so kind of organizations on either end of the scale don't get screwed, for a better term, in licensing costs. The positives of that is organizations that have a high device or to user ratio can actually be licensed very cheaply. Example I like to use is, say you have a warehouse with 100 workers and you have 5 shipping systems. You can license those for 5. You can license that with 5 device counts. So you can actually do it pretty cheap. But the drawback there is that the licensing, it is perpetual for the most part. So, if you can't realistically predict the future very well and you overbuy, there's generally not really much you can do. But for Windows Virtual Desktop, the licensing actually, like I mentioned before in Microsoft terms, isn't that complicated. Basically, every user obtains a USL or a user subscription license that provides Windows Virtual Desktop rights. Once you have users that have rights, you gain access to both the single session and multi-session workloads in Windows Virtual Desktop. Now, you will have to pay separately for the running those virtual machines in Azure. So that's a separate cost outside of the licensing, but that you would basically replace with hardware costs. So instead of going like a thick client, you go with a thin client and then build that other cost into the hosting cost. There is a link in the sidebar for the pricing calculator, so you get an idea of what it looks like. But in the few models that we've run, it's cheaper than you would expect. But I encourage you guys to take a look at it and play with the numbers. You have to do it on a 100 seat minimum for the calculator. But from what I've seen so far, there's no minimum for what you actually need to consume. So say you have 50, just take that number, divide it by 2. So for the positives of it, if you already have something like Microsoft 365, you already have Windows Virtual Desktop covered in the licensing. A lot of other things like Windows 10 E3, that plan also has virtual desktop rights covered. Negatives so far, what we've seen is, as of right now, the USLs are only user-based. So if you have an organization where you have a high amount of users to device ratio, you're not going to be in as good of a spot. There are also add-ons you can add licensing-wise to kind of enhance the experience. Like David was mentioning before, one of the requirements for getting this going is you do need Azure Active Directory, which there basically is a free version that you can obtain, or you can enhance that by adding on something like Azure Active Directory Premium P1, P2, and it just adds a little more features baked in.
All right. And then, as far as, before we go to the questions from the audience, as far as how Trusted Tech Team can help, are there other things that, insights or advice that you guys can kind of offer right now?
As of right now, like I mentioned, it's a really, really new technology. As we were kind of preparing for this today, on Friday, Dave sends me a link. Hey, they just released the UI tools. Like you mentioned before, you could only do it through PowerShell. So like stuff's evolving constantly. So if this looks at all like a solution that seems like it might be good for you, but maybe it doesn't check all the boxes, I would check back, every couple months, because obviously it's a huge priority for Microsoft. Even in some of the webinars I've listened to, the resources that they're actually putting into this, it is a huge priority. One of the things I actually want to point out in the sidebar, there's a piece of content. It is a PDF from one of the webinars that we went through, and it is probably one of the most in-depth kind of go-throughs of a new tech that I've seen Microsoft put out, especially in quite some time. So there's a lot of questions. I'm looking through the questions you guys sent in already. A lot of them that obviously we won't be able to get to all of them, but a lot of them are answered in that. So, and they go pretty in depth as far as even the technology and how it runs. So I would take a look at that, definitely. But for at least for what we're gonna do, or how we help with this, is our main job is kind of help customers get the licensing need, put them in the right direction, having these evaluations, asking you about your environment, what are your goals, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and try and point you in the right direction. Historically, if we're choosing between multiple technologies, it's usually, okay, if you check this box, you go this route, this box, you go this route. This one, when it comes to RDS and Windows Virtual Desktop, it's a little different because it's going to start, being weighted to one side more and more over time. So, we're here. Feel free to reach out to us, ask us questions. We're happy to help. I mean, personally, for me, it's very exciting to talk about. So I'd be happy to hop on, with any of you guys to talk about it. It's just fun, at least for me personally. But yeah, we're here to help, basically.
All right. Cool. Well, we have a ton of questions coming in from the audience, so we definitely want to get to them. This most recent one from Computer Dave. When we looked at VDI a number of years ago, it was way too cost prohibitive for our company size, 100. Is the licensing for WDV better for smaller companies over VDI that's self-hosted? What are your thoughts, David Spencer?
Yeah, so for small businesses, yeah, the price is basically gotten way, way better. When I was looking at going through the calculator, one of the solutions we are kind of set it on was a decently medium power user for an average of, I think, like 16 hours a day. And it ended up coming out to like $7 per user per month for the hosting cost. And then you add that on to the licensing cost, depending on what you have. You can get it as cheap as about $10 a month. So yeah, it definitely has improved since you looked at it years ago. And like I mentioned also, we haven't seen anything as far as a minimum goes. So, even smaller companies can definitely take advantage of it. On top of that, as long as you have someone that is willing to kind of do the setup, from what Dave has told me, it's not too complicated. One of the other links in the sidebar is a video we threw on YouTube. Dave went through and did a mock setup of an environment, and it's literally 3.5 minutes long from start to finish. So check that out. But it seems to be, honestly, a pretty good solution, even for small businesses.
Cool. All right. Here's another one from Eagle Mitchell. I think RDS has scared people away in the giant push in the security market to not have RDS open to the internet. Can you discuss some simple ways to harden the deployment, like VPN, virtual apps through web server login, etc.? That might be David Lloyd. Yeah. Do you have any advice for that?
That would be me. So the difference with this is there's not port 3389. The RDS port isn't exposed to the internet. Windows Virtual Desktop uses what they call reverse connect. So all of the connections go through their gateway from the client, and then the client relays those connections to the session host. So you're not making a direct connection to anything other than the gateway service that's part of the platform as a service offering that Microsoft includes with Windows Virtual Desktop. So there's that aspect of it. And also with Azure Active Directory, if you have the P2 plan, you also get the conditional access, which you can force MFA, multi-factor authentication for any of your users that connect in. So there's that security along with the auditing in Azure Active Directory. You can see exactly when your users connected, where they connected from, the IP address, and if they use MFA to connect in.
Tim, any security precautions you guys are taking to harden your access to RDS?
Mostly right now, it's like I said, we've been sort of securing a lot of stuff more and more lately. So it's mostly just making sure the passwords are now changed more often. We also, like I said, we're using VPN as well, coupled with any remote desktop services, just because they want to make sure that there is that extra layer of protection between like the inside and the outside. They don't want people just remoting in from their home machine. And that's mostly also because they don't want any issues that maybe the home machine has a virus. You never really know. So it's mostly company deployed laptops or desktops with VPN, and then layering in the remote desktop as well.
Cool. All right. Here's another licensing question from Alex Fisher. David, is there a way to add VDI rights to existing Office 365 standard premium accounts, or would you have to jump to the E-levels?
Yeah, so no, you don't have to jump to the E-levels, which is nice. When you're talking about licensing Windows Virtual Desktop, you basically just need to get something that has it. So whether it is part of an enterprise plan like E3, or you can get it separately alongside something else you have, kind of piecemeal it in. So you can get a Windows 10 Enterprise E3, for example, which is about $12 a month, I think, MSRP. And then say you have something like, business essentials, which is only a few bucks. You can piecemeal them together. You just need to get something that has those rights. In the PDF as well, there's a slide there where it lists off all of the USLs that have those rights. So it can actually get pretty cheap.
All right. Let's take a question from Nick Kopka. What's going on, Nick? One of the biggest hurdles we face in an MSP environment is the client's usage of RDS and printer redirection. How do VDI and WVD handle printers in comparison? David Lloyd, do you have any input on printer in the WVD environment?
Yes, as long as you're using the Windows Virtual Desktop remote desktop client. So they have a special remote desktop client for Windows Virtual Desktop. When you sign in with that client, it will allow you to redirect your ports and printers and then your local drives as well.
Okay. Tim, is that something that you guys have struggled with before, is dealing with printers when it comes to RDS environments?
Yeah, we actually used to have a lot of issues, especially with whenever we use Citrix. So we actually switched to just using essentially on-prem file server, we found that actually works much easier, that the server on-prem figures out if they're coming in from the VPN, if they're coming in from RDS, or if they're on-prem. It seems to make things a little bit easier versus doing redirection.
Okay. Yeah, and to add on to that too, of the two methods you can use to connect to Windows Virtual Desktop, you have the web application through the browser, and then you have the RDC client. When you connect through the RDC client, it actually asks you if you want to pass through either the USB devices or access to printer. And then from an administrative perspective, there's some granular control. You can or cannot lock. You can lock that out if you want. So they've very much tried to mimic, a desktop experience.
All right. This is a question from B. Beckers. Let's give this to David Lloyd. Does WVD support multiple displays?
It does support multiple displays. I believe it's a really large number. We talked about this. I think it was 32 displays. I don't have the information top in front of me right now, but it's a large number of displays it supports, and I believe it supports up to 4K too for each display.
It's 16 if you connect through the RDC client, it's 16 displays up to 4K, which is insane.
Yeah.
What it's like if you're like showing movies or something like that. Why would you need that many? Okay, cool. All right, this one's from Technically Clinical. David Spencer, is there a major reason for the huge cost difference licensing-wise between WVD and RDS? Incentivization.
Microsoft is kind of doing everything they can to move people onto this platform. The biggest way you can tell they're really pushing for it is Windows 7. You have an option to deploy Windows 7 into the Windows Virtual Desktop. And what they've done is they say, if you move Windows 7 in there, you get the extended security updates for all 3 years, just free, built in. So they're trying to push it very much so. Every kind of time we've looked at, thrown models at the calculator and, compared it to hardware costs and licensing costs for RDS, it's just very far in the favor of Windows Virtual Desktop, which, to me tells they're just trying to push it. But at the same time, I think it's absolutely worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, let's see. This one's from Dragon's Rule. Would WVD make sense to replace RDS for just a single remote app? Either David's or Tim, I guess. Do you guys have any thoughts?
I don't know if it makes sense. I guess that would be up to your case-by-case scenario, but you can just publish one app. You don't have to publish a full desktop. So in that case, it's just like RDS, and it uses remote app technology as the underlying technology for that.
Yeah, it all depends on how much it costs to support the actual software on, on-prem, maybe. If it's easier just to deploy it out through there, versus having to maybe keep legacy machines around. That's might be the best benefit, where you don't want the legacy machines still sitting out there with Windows 10 or with Windows 7 or anything else. That maybe you just deploy it via the app, and that's your workaround at least to get rid of the older machines and still keep up with security updates.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's get to a couple more. Lario wants to know, for David Spencer, price points for RDS on small businesses versus Azure infrastructure.
Yeah, so I think small businesses actually would benefit from going with something like the WVD, because the cost to get started is a lot lower. When you're looking at a solution like RDS, that's what you would categorize as a capital expense, which is a large upfront cost, but then over time, the investment gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Whereas Windows Virtual Desktop, there's no entry fee to it. As long as you can literally set it up for a month if you want. It's kind of, like going to a gym and you have to pay a huge, application fee. And then, over time versus here, you can just, here's the rate, you can go in for a month. So I think for small business, it actually does work because it's, not only not upfront costs, but it's just scalable, right? You pay for what you need. And that's all you pay for. It can go up or down. You need to hire people. You can spin it up and the cost scales with your employees. You need to let some people go. Then that cost drops at the same time. So generally stuff that's highly scalable works well for small businesses. And honestly, small businesses usually don't have a lot of scalable options when it comes to cost. So that's something to me, we've gotten feedback on this that's something people like about it.
Cool. David Lloyd, we're getting a lot of questions, and I don't know if you have an answer to this. We're getting a lot of questions on how well WVD supports high-end graphics. So for folks using CAD, 3D modeling, and that sort of stuff, are you aware of how well that performs compared to other solutions?
I don't know of any performance enhancements features for that. I believe they were working with VMware and Citrix for that kind of application, but I might be mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Another licensing question. Eagle Mitchell wants to know, so with virtual desktop rights included in Microsoft Business 365, do you still need to pay for resources used in Azure, just not any additional licensing components?
Correct. Yeah, the cost of Windows Virtual Desktop is broken into two pieces. It is the licensing costs, basically the access, which are those USLs, user subscription licenses, and then there is the infrastructure cost, basically the hosting time. There are a few different ways you can cut down on that cost. By nature, when you're talking about outsourcing that compute power, storage, and all that stuff, it's based on how often it's on. However, when you reserve, basically commit to X amount of time, it does get cheaper. So that's an option you can go with as well. But that cost is something you got to remember is you're replacing thick client hardware cost or server hardware cost or maintenance with what you're putting into Azure. So yeah, it is there. But just always keep in mind, the costs you're saving elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's get a couple more. This is a good one. So Alex Fish wants to know, so for companies new to remote work from home that want to take a look at virtualized desktops instead of RDP, what are some good steps to take to validate that method before diving in head first? David Lloyd, do you have any recommendations?
I don't know of any testing environments that are set up for this kind of thing, but Azure does offer $200 in credits, so you could set up a test environment for your employees. That's what we did here before we fully rolled it out. Other than that, there's not anything that's set up for testing for people to just try at the moment that I know of.
David Spencer, anything you would add to that?
No, it's basically just going to be that credit, to be honest. Mm-hmm. You can, like I mentioned, there's not a minimum that we've seen. And I'm going to kick myself if I find one because I've said it like 3 or 4 times now. But yeah, if you use Azure credit to build yourself a test environment and give it a go, I'd say that's the best way to do it. I don't know of anything else.
Okay. All right. Well, guys, we are running out of time. I do have one last question. It's very important in light of both Cinco de Mayo and Taco Tuesday. Do you guys prefer corn taco shells, or flour tacos? David Lloyd, we'll start with you. You did mention you had a burrito earlier this morning, so
definitely corn shells.
Interesting. David Spencer, do you have a preference?
For tacos, it's corn. For burritos, it's flour.
Well, yeah, corn, you can't have a.
Yeah, like flour tacos. No, after work today, I am going out and getting meat and tortillas, and we are having taco night here. I got to make up for the Wi-Fi being off.
And Tim Roberts, do you have any taco preferences?
Oh, I got to agree with him with that. The corn tacos, definitely.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I wanted to give you guys also one last opportunity to share kind of any final thoughts or advice that you might have. David Spencer, we'll start with you. Any final takeaways from the Trusted Tech team to the audience today?
Oh, boy. Honestly, this is keep up with this. I know it wasn't really on my radar until a couple months ago, and I'm personally really excited to kind of continue learning about it and seeing what else they put out. Read through that PDF because they actually touch on some of the stuff they're looking to do in Q2, Q3. So I would just keep up with the technology and see, what they put out, because I think even if it's something you end up not going with, it's still, to me, really exciting.
All right. David Lloyd, any last bits of advice that you have for audience members today?
Yeah, just like I mentioned earlier, I would try that trial with Azure, the $200 credit, set up a demo environment, proof of concept for your company, prove to, if you need to, prove to higher ups that it's a technology that'll work and save them money. I think that's the best way to go. Then you're actually learning how it all works, and then you have a proof of concept set up for them.
Awesome. And Tim, for folks that are watching today that either need some advice around RDS or just kind of exploring all the different options that are out here to help address any circumstances they may be put in unexpectedly, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I know that, like I said, it's some of the things that, you get questions of, like, how secure is it? It also all depends on your backend infrastructure too, and how you want to connect through. Like I said, if you want to layer up a little bit, you add a VPN connection in there too. That way it just adds an extra layer of security that you don't have to worry about as much. So you want to do multi-factor authentication as well too. Maybe it helps.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you again. It's now time to announce the winners of our gift cards. The winner of our $250 gift cards are going to go to Edward CT and Granite Geek. You guys are the winners of our gift cards. Make sure to send a message to David S. in the community. Let him know which email address you would like that shipped to. And please enjoy that on us. And big thank you again to David, and Tim. Hope you guys had a great time. I definitely enjoyed hanging out with y'all as always. Hope you guys will be around soon. Make sure to check out all the other events that we've got coming up by clicking on that orange widget or sticking around until after the presentation ends. But until next time, guys, stay safe and keep it spicy, and we'll see y'all back here next time. So long, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good one.